why people would choose to overwinter here, can't you? Or spend the year here even. But of course, this is just a snapshot of what the year looks like. So much of the months would be pitch dark and the sea would be frozen over, which is actually for many people a good thing, because when the sea is frozen over, it allows so much more access to all these different areas. So this cabin, it was built in 1927 by one of the most famous trappers called Hilmar Noyes. And Hilmar Noyes, he actually had 38 years of overwintering up here. Wow. It's just incredible. So he really made it his life's work and passion to really be a trapper and fully live the trapping life year after year. And he made quite a lot of money out of it as well. The more years you do it, of course, like anything, the more you learn and the more that they're able to catch. So he built this place with his uncle, and they actually built quite a few different trapping cabins all around the area, some of which were bombed by the Germans in the Second World War. But like this one, this is owned by Sisselman, so the governor of Svalbard. It's in excellent condition, it gets renovated all the time. As you can see, the felt all looks very new. And in a minute, when we've finished chatting, you're welcome to go inside, probably two or three at a time is best, and have a good look around. And this is I'd say this is a fairly large example of a trapping hut. There's an entranceway, and there's also the main compartment, and then even an attached outhouse, which now is full of firewood. I guess back then it would have been more space for supplies, for your food supplies, and for everything that you've trapped, you have to keep it somewhere. So back in the day, in the sort of early 1900s, these trappers, they really were the superheroes of Norway. There would be newspaper articles about them, people would be talking about them in the bars of Tromsø. They were the real life heroes of the time. And at the time, lots of the little boys, they were growing up wanting to be trappers and leading this sort of romanticised, mysterious life that the trappers lived up here. And so most people, the trappers, they would have come up here for almost a year. They might have arrived in August, September, and left again in June, July. And they would have arranged with the ship and the captains when to pick them up a year ahead. So come and get us on the 15th of June, we'll be waiting right here. And sometimes it would work like that. Sometimes they'd be waiting for weeks and weeks to get their pickup for a variety of reasons. You know, maybe the ship had engine trouble, maybe the ice was still too thick. So they really had to eke out their supplies just in case they weren't picked up when they thought they were going to be. So they would have come up here, the trappers, usually, sometimes they were individuals, or sometimes they were in pairs. Some people also brought their partners up here. So Hilmar Noyes, after a few years living here and in other cabins up here, he moved down to Isfjorden to a cabin called Fredheim. You might have seen it when we went to Templefjorden in the first days of the trip. Fredheim was known as the luxurious cabin. It was the only cabin to have two different levels, so two floors. And Hilmar Noyes lived there very famously with his wife, and they made it a very inviting place. And all the trappers would go there for coffee and for dinner because they were always completely spoiled. And this cabin at the time, it had gingham curtains across the windows. It was just very, very homely compared to much more of the other more male, rural trapper cabins. So this went on for like many years. Like I said, he was here for nearly 40 years. And then trapping sort of died out in a way. You probably heard in Piot's talk, there are still a few trappers here who really overwinter still, and they make a living from the foxes that they hunt. There's still a quota for foxes, and also reindeer now, more than they used to. The trappers back then, they weren't so much going after reindeer. It was very much the fox skins that was the big money, and especially the blue morph. So the blue morph is sort of maybe 1% of all foxes that are born, with a different genetic variants. And they say it's about one fox in every 10 litters, which is a blue morph. And a litter might be somewhere between 5 foxes and 12, let's say. And the blue morph stays chocolatey brown all through the year. It doesn't go white. So even though a fox skin might only be this sort of size, it would still fetch a lot more money on the European market than a polar bear pelt. Despite polar bears being rarer and being so much more work to skin, so often, because it takes so much time, the trappers would get the dead bear, they would bury it under the ice to freeze it down until they had time to get round to actually skinning it. And they'd be there for a whole day or two, as you can imagine, scraping all the fat off, salting it. So they would have come pre-prepared with bags and bags of salt to salt all the animals. They'd roll it up, perhaps put it in brine and seal it in a barrel before taking it back to Tromsø, where it would be able to be tanned properly and then sold. And have you spoken already about the different types of traps that were used? So the foxes, generally they were caught by fall traps. So at first I think Piotr said